Good afternoon, all. It's a great honor to be your MC today, so I thank Wendy for asking me. And we are here to commemorate the events of August 27th and September 4th, 1949. A better word than commemorate, which feels like celebrate, though maybe a better word is recount or remember. And as many of us know, the Peekskill Riots, or the so-called Peekskill Riots, actually describe two events, two concerts, which together they call the Peekskill Riots, sponsored by people's artists and to benefit the Civil Rights Congress. Many people know that the first concert never happened. It was supposed to be an evening concert, and I won't recount the entire story now, it would take too long, but it was supposed to be an evening concert, and instead there were confrontations with reactionaries, and eventually the concert organizers had to retreat down the hill, put the women and children on the stage, surround the stage to protect them. They burned the furniture, they burned the literature. They were about to attack the stage when suddenly the lights went out, and it created just enough of a window of confusion for the people to escape and the police to separate the parties and so forth. And of course, the second event, after a big meeting in New York, it was decided that they were going to hold a concert in Peekskill. And they got union members, brave union members from the Longshoremen's and the Furriers and other unions to surround the concert shoulder to shoulder to make sure no one could get in. And they thought they had gotten away with it. They thought they had successfully had their concert, only to find that when they left the concert, a policeman was purposely directing them in a certain direction where piles of stones were, and to have their cars pelted, and about 150 people injured and so forth. These were events that laid bare an open wound of racism and xenophobia in America, and unfortunately these are wounds that we're still dealing with today, and maybe even being exacerbated today by the current so-called leadership that we have. So it's important that we recount and remember these things. But we're also here to remember a very remarkable man. Paul Robeson really was a sort of a Superman. He was good at so many things. Varsity athlete in high school in 4 separate sports. In college, he excelled at football. He was a football star. And he was also an intellectual. He was the valedictorian of his class. And of course, we all know that he excelled at singing, one of the great voices of the century, and also at acting. And his version of Old Man River that appeared in the movie Showboat is still the quintessential version, and some say his version on Broadway of Othello is still the quintessential version. But he was also a man that believed deeply in justice, and he fought for workers' rights and union rights. He spoke out for civil rights in the midst of the era of Jim Crow, and for world peace in the midst of the blacklist, in the midst of the Red Scare, the post-World War II era of commophobia. So some words that come to my mind is also courage and bravery to describe Paul Robeson. But this is also very personal to me, so we can put aside those lofty words for a minute, and let me just tell you personally. On my wife's side of the family, there was a relative and close friend of the family. We called him Uncle Heshy. And Heshy would often tell us how he and his friend Marty snuck out of Camp Kinderland, borrowed Marty's father's car, parked it, and then snuck through the woods to get to the concert because they didn't want to pay, only to find that this altercation was going on and the stage was about to be attacked and so forth. And some accounts say that the lights were shut off by a policeman named Bowman, but according to Heshy, it was his friend Marty that shut off the lights. I guess we'll never know, but it saved the day. And they were only able to escape themselves by being crazy young teenagers. They pretended that they were with the reactionaries, ran with them up the hill, theoretically chasing the escaping concertgoers, shouting all sorts of crazy things, and then they snuck off into the woods and got back to their car. On my side of the family, I believe my father was there. I don't know for sure, because I sadly did not get a chance to ask him while he was still here with us. But I know for a fact that my mother was there. She was there with her friend Erin. And she describes driving through that gauntlet of piles of stones and getting the car pelted and the windows breaking, and Aaron telling her to duck down for her own safety. And she said to Aaron, well, why don't you duck down? And Aaron said, I'll be damned if I'm going to duck down for those fascist bastards. But the truth is he just had to drive the car. Someone had to get out of there. How could such things happen right here in Peekskill? Some of you know that I recently helped put together a book with quotes from Pete Seeger called Chopping Wood. It's in the lobby if you're interested. But in there, Pete talks quite a bit about Peekskill. And he describes how someone who was a son of one of the reactionaries actually told him later that this was a very organized attack, that there were not only just the American Legion, but there were elements of KKK that had infiltrated the Peekskill police force at the time, and describes how the week before the concert, some of these people took high schoolers from Peekskill down to the waterfront where they could collect tennis ball-sized stones and pile them in the back of the pickup truck so they could pile them in piles along this road. Pete describes how there were adults in the bushes in case the young people throwing rocks got into trouble, someone got out of their car or something, that there was backup, that there were people with rifles, sharpshooters, that there was walkie-talkies. So, Tina Seeger may be right when she says, more than a riot, this was a planned attack. At least that second week, it was a highly planned attack. So Pete was there, and I asked him once, what did you sing? And he said, only 2 or 3 songs, but the only 2 I remember. And he described the 2 songs, and it's interesting. The first song he sang, probably trying to find some common ground with the sharpshooters on the hills. There was a country song that was very popular on the radio called T for Texas, originally recorded in the 1920s by the Singing Brakemen, but recorded just the year before by Merle Travis, so it had been on the radio recently. And then the only other song he could remember singing was looking down at his own people, his own constituency, which, by the way, was very large. The original concert, they thought maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people would come, but with all the publicity after the first attack, a week later, by some accounts, there were over 20,000 people there. And the song he chose to sing was a new song that he and Lee Hayes had written called The Hammer Song. Some of us call it If I Had a Hammer. Well, I don't want to talk to you all afternoon. We have a lot of great music here. But before I leave the stage, I would like to sing to you one song. We know that we have a very divided country today, and as difficult as it is, we know it's important to try and find some common ground, ways to communicate with people we may not disagree with. So, in that spirit, I'm going to try and sing T for Texas. I can't yodel as high as Pete, almost no one ever could, but I'll try and provide an echo of Pete's version of T for Texas, and then we'll bring on some other great musicians.
T for Tennessee, T for Texas, T for Tennessee. Well, it's T for Thelma, that gal who made a fool out of me. You don't want me, you don't have to stall. more women than a passenger train can haul. Let me be your sidetrack, baby. Baby, till your mainline come. Let me your sidetrack, baby, till my mainline come. I can do me more switching than your mainline ever done.
Thank you.